It's hard to imagine a battle more grandiose than the one we witnessed a decade ago. Yet what if I told you that the forces that took to the battlefield then weren't even the mightiest and most numerous of Sauron's armies? To the north, the hordes of Dura and Stirling boasted superior numbers and might. Had Sauron combined all his forces and hurled them at the asteroid, the siege would have seemed like a mere flicker against the might of Sauron's hordes. Gondor and their allies would not have been able to withstand the onslaught. Sauron's forces would have continued their march westward. However, the unification of Sauron's armies wasn't a possibility due to certain obstacles. The people who had inhabited the region before posed a significant challenge to Sauron's quest for triumph. To avoid being stabbed in the back, Lord Borat decided to strike a devastating blow against the RF, coinciding with the same moment Aragorn, with the remnants of Gondor and Rohan, rallied for battle. Challenging Saffronoff at the Black Gate is essential, a battle of monumental significance for Middle-earth. A confrontation so immense in scale and significance that it eclipses any other skirmish of the Third Age. The elves defended the lands. It was not he who conjured horses from the unified army, the Stirlings, and the valleys of Dura. Neither history nor I would have withstood it. If you don't watch this clip to the end, thank you for watching it in its entirety. Remember, you possess the best of forces and Stirlings. Runa, when united with allied forces, would have crushed all adversaries and reduced the plains to ash. Sauron intended to obliterate the dwarves' abode, plunge the lands of Dale into chaos, and raise the dominions of the Academy of Sciences. Subsequently, IG would conquer all lands up to Revan. On March 14, 2019, of the Third Age, the triumphant march of the Stirling troops was marked by the shouts at the Carno Ford, defended by King Bran's army, a leader of the cause. Heavy rain and the roaring currents of the Gordon River announced the march and approach of the Orcs and Easterlings. The garrison at the riverbank's fortifications noticed no movement, as the Stirlings slowly crept closer to the armor, located not far from Captain's main ford, which was blocked by a fortress wall. A group of 1,000 Stirlings crossed the ford while the main forces waited on the opposite bank. The men of Ron were already bypassing the rear of Dale's fortifications out of the garrison's sight. The finest blades struck from the shadows, catching the fallen defenders of Dale off guard and forcing open the gates of the ford. Brand, upon learning of the enemy's deceitful intent, immediately calls the garrison to battle. However, it was too late, as 1,000 Stirlings had already breached the gates. The warriors took positions, trying to fend off attacks from both directions. The soldiers managed to push back the curling attackers who had struck the defenders from behind and through which they had infiltrated the fortifications. Yet they struggled to properly counter the Stirlings' advance. The walls fell, and at the first opportunity, the enemy unleashed a devastating rear assault with the hordes of Ron. Brent decided to abandon the fortifications to conserve strength for the main battle and led his army to safety. Sometime later, several thousand dwarves led by Ironfoot emerged from the lonely mountain. To aid Brando, the dwarves and defenders of Dale formed a corridor of protection, allowing the citizens of Dale and other surrounding villages to swiftly move towards the open gates. Brando's army, with the fortress shield, provided a sanctuary in silver for the civilians, while they themselves engaged in fierce combat on all defensive fronts. When the enemy presented their army and advanced with siege engines, the people of Dale were prepared. Brant, aiming to cover the evacuation of the residents, stationed squads on the fortress walls and near the bridge leading to the airport gates. Instead of laying siege to their camp, the enemy struck immediately. The rapid march of the hostile army reached the walls of Dale, and a storm of Stirlings and Orcs assailed them. the enemy stormed the walls wherever possible, and even in places where it seemed only elite climbers could scale. The onslaught of the warriors and Sterlings was halted, but pushing them back completely proved difficult. The enemy was on the verge of securing positions on the walls, and the Orcs of Dura were about to break through at the bridge. Meanwhile, the dwarves, who had stood by the wall even before the river crossing, readied themselves for the onslaught of the orc hordes. Fiery projectiles were launched swiftly. The units did not wait for the enemy to reach the infantry positions. Their main objective was to stagger the high gods, even if just for a moment, due to which the entire advance of the rapid horde was stifled. An hour into the battle, to the east of Dale, the main army of Sterlings arrives. Tens of thousands of elite warriors from Runa, chariots, and at the helm, the leader of the dwarven army, driving them forward to meet the enemy forces. The enemy would be crushed. The Sterling guards enveloped the defenders' positions from all sides. Rainfalls of arrows and projectiles from siege engines besieged the enemy. Time and again, warriors covered in shields and silver were overwhelmed. The heavy assault chariots of the Sterlings repeatedly tried to break through with their onslaught. They shattered the formations of Runa and Orc units with fiery projectiles. To withstand such intense pressure for such a prolonged period is a feat few can achieve. The capital is now teeming with enemy units, and as if through the will of their overlord, they repel all, laying waste to everything in their path. For 3 days, the gates of Rib were open, and the residents of the surrounding villages found themselves in the dwarf abode. Tens of thousands of Sterlings and an even larger number of orcs finally managed to repel the defenders' formations. 3 days of bloody carnage took the lives of many outstanding warriors of Rib and body. Everything from the southern gates to the river and adjacent to the lonely mountain was strewn with the bodies of tens of thousands of fighters. The exhausting confrontation drained many defenders' strength to continue. I fear that if this continues, the army will fall due to its numerous reserves. The elves won't show up, as they are engaged in battles to the north. The dwarves and humans are destined to stand to the death on their own. Despite all attempts to break through the ranks of Erebor and Dale's fighters, the Sterlings could not get through. Attempts to counterattack were often made, where the enemy amassed a significant number of units, which could lead to the loss of flanks. After the Sterlings managed to repel the elite squads, the motorcycle fighters retreated behind the Iron Guard shields, thereby regaining strength for the subsequent counterattack. Realizing there was no longer any point in holding the positions, brothers decided together to create a defensive corridor, through which the Dale fighters could retreat to the lonely mountain. By that time, Sterling had already been completely taken. This brand, as well as the best warriors of humans and dwarves, remained to cover the general retreats to the gates of the pass. The most terrifying part of the Battle of the Dale and Rib Lords began, and the most deadly fighters, having taken the best positions to repel the onslaught, became a single shield, allowing the Sterlings and Orcs to break through corridors through which the mountain warriors, humans, runes, and Orcs retreated. For long hours, they couldn't break through the formation of brand defenders, and with the last strength from their dwelling, some still stood in pairs, sparing no one who came under attack. Unfortunately, for the defenders, the best warriors and Sterlings also enter the battle, having regained their strength and mounted their horses. Cavalry units of Sterlings at full speed rush into the rear. The Gnome and Dave units from the cavalry weapons lose their fortress of shields. Brent is cut off from their squad. Surrounded by the best Sterling warriors, they meet their demise. Losing a flank, the dwarves remained cut off from the gates of Rib. However, the task was accomplished, and the main forces were already behind the gates of the lonely mountain. Even the remnants of the dwarves attempted to break out of the encirclement. However, they heroically fell without ever reaching the gates. It seemed that the enemy had won, but in such circumstances, starting a siege seemed almost impossible for them. And if they were to anticipate any success, it would only be after a prolonged period of siege. The defenders of the Ribbon Dale from the fortress walls of the Lonely Mountain did not allow the Sterling units to approach. The enemy was forced to surround the Lonely Mountain, stretch their positions, and wait for the defenders to run out of supplies. And when the time came, Sterling would once again attempt to storm the fortress. After the harvest plundering, they continued their campaign, but encountered the combined forces of the woodland elves in the north. Trent stood shoulder to shoulder in the direction of exterminating Dora's horde. When news from Sterling reached about Sauron's fall and the victories of the Alpine troops in the north, they not only lost their fighting spirit, but also saw no point in continuing the siege. However, before lifting the siege and retreating, the dwarves make a sortie. The Stone Helmet, unaware of the great victory in the south of Middle-earth, leads the people of Dale and the dwarves. The rapidly approaching forces catch the retreating Sterling troops off guard. Without giving the enemy a single chance for salvation, they decimate a significant portion of the opposing army. The severe defeat of Sterling's army brings Rune to its knees, and the enemy, with its tail between its legs, will no longer dare to challenge them. Too much blood has been shed. The inhabitants of the plains have lost too much. My friends, don't forget to hit the like button and of course leave a comment. It's super important. If you want to see a new video, the channel is in need of a patron due to the loss of monetization and absence of ad integrations. You must understand that as the creator, I need motivation to continue producing content. Thank you. Are you the best?